It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Okay, we got a really exciting show for you today. We have Don Crutchfield, who's kind of a legend in the private investigation world. He's written several books: Confession of a Hollywood PI, Case of the Missing Screenwriter, Protect Yourself at All Times. He's got a website, pi4stars.com. That's pi4stars.com if you want to reach out to Don Crutchfield, California private investigator. Don, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Ed.
Hey, nice to meet you, my friend.
Nice to meet you.
Don, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? We were talking off the air a bit, and it sounds like you're up there in years. How old are you?
I'm in my 70s.
Oh, God bless you, man. Because you're talking about Judy Garland off the air. I said, tell us a little about yourself. Who is Don Crutchfield? What would you like to tell us about yourself?
Well, when I was 10 years old, I sat on Judy Garland's lap, and she sang Over the Rainbow to me. When I was 22, she sat on my lap, and I was her bodyguard. And, that's full circle. I grew up with a family. A little buddy of mine used to hang out at his house. His dad was the original PI of the Stars. And when I was 14, I knew that's what I wanted to do. Now, when I was 10 and I was sitting on Judy Garland's lap, I didn't know a hell of a lot, but I knew that was Dorothy from Wizard of Oz. You couldn't fool me there. But since I've been 18 years old, I've worked my way through school. I've been a private investigator. Ed, I'm very blessed. I'm one of the few people that's gotten to do exactly what I wanted to do. And it's been a great ride, and it still is. And I've had more fun. I've had more luck than skill, but I knew what to do with the luck when I got it. And it's been a great life.
And you're still working full time?
Yeah. And I got to work for all my heroes. They were either my heroes and I worked for them, or they were targets and I worked for them. Like Michael Jackson was a target. OJ was a guy I used to hang around with, but when I was like 22 years old, I lived at Marlon Brando's house.
Oh, really?
And I was his bodyguard. I used to take Christian to school. And I would have taken a bullet for him in a minute. I loved him. He treated me like family, dysfunctional family, but he treated me like family. In fact, I have the chapter of the book on my website in case you want to go and look at that. But he asked me. I'm 22 years old. I'm in really good shape. I've played a lot of sports. I'd worked a very hard, very demanding undercover job, and I was in tremendous shape. And he asked me, he says, do you want to go out in the backyard? And, he says, can you box? And I said, yeah, I can box a little bit. And he said, you want to put on the gloves and go in the backyard? And I'm thinking, if I can't whip up on a 40-year-old movie star, I'm in the wrong business. Well, we went out in the backyard, and we just beat the crap out of each other. And that guy could hit like you couldn't believe. I was doing everything I could just to stay up with him. And the attorney called me that night and said, is there anything you need up there? And I said, yeah, I need a cut man. I said, you didn't tell me this guy was this tough, But we had a wonderful time. And, his best friend was Wally Cox, which, that goes back to old television. A lot of your listeners don't know who Wally Cox was, but he was sort of a Woody Allen type comedian. I mean, the original Odd Couple. And each night, Brando and I, we would, after we put Christian to bed, and Wally was an alcoholic, after we put him to bed, we'd sit up and talk. And I left Mexico. I started going to Mexico when I was 18. And I later on became a captain in the federales and a major in the Mexico City Police Department. But I fell in love with the country, the people, the culture. So I would find myself sitting on the couch with a big fireplace going on Mulholland, which Brando lived in the same gate that Jack Nicholson lives now. You'd have to go through that gate. And I'd find myself talking to him about Mexico, and he seemed to know a lot about it. And then, Ed, I realized I'm talking to Emiliano Zapata. I mean, this is a guy that's Eva Zapata. And that's been my whole life, that type of thing.
Well, let me ask you this, because Brando's son, Miko, for a while he was Michael Jackson's bodyguard, right? Did you know him well?
No, I didn't know him well at all. I knew he was the bodyguard. Christian was my little boy. I took Christian to school. I helped him with his homework. I taught him how to play football. He'd hold onto my hand and look at me like I was the only same thing as his life. Now, Brando loved Christian, but two things Brando should have never done was have kids or go on the Larry King show. But because he didn't want to do the day-to-day maintenance, and he had a ton of children. But Christian was my little boy, and I always knew something bad was going to happen to him. He was just that kind of a kid. And I'd catch him with his hand in the cookie jar a lot of times, and I could just picture that look on his face when he killed Dag Dulé, his sister's boyfriend. He didn't mean to do it. It was an accident. At that point, Christian couldn't even plan something like that. But he's one of my kids. Another one of my kids was Charles Bronson's son, Jason. And then I had Carol O'Connor's son, who the two of them grew up together, and they both died of drugs. I got to tell you, I fought for their life, and drugs is an evil foe. It almost always wins, and it got to Christian as well. So
let me ask you this: now, Christian, when Christian was in high school, didn't Christian go to high school and he was best friends with Danny Bonaducci and also Michael Jackson?
I don't know that because my whole thing ended with the family when Christian was quite young, and at that point in time, Brando was very much involved in Tahiti, building up his property over there and what have you. Right. See, after the job was over, Brando used to call me up and say, he called me Kid and I called him Champ. And he'd say, Kid, do you want to go to the show? Well, do you want to go to the show with Marlon Brando? Get out of town. Of course you do. But that meant we went to have a screening at like Universal or one of the studios. And then he would pick certain people to come back to his house to have a party afterwards. And I was always part of that. Now, during that period of time, I'd say, Marlon, I want to take Christian out to, Disneyland or something like that. And he'd say, well, that'd be great. But Anna Cashby got control. First of all, we were having the reason why I was there, we were having a bitter custody battle. And Anna Cashby was Marlon Brando's first wife. And she was crazy as anybody I've ever run into. And she was on drugs, and she'd pull out a gun, and I still have scars from Anna Cashby, and we got a judge that took the kid. We had temporary custody of Christian, and he was doing quite well under our tutelage, and so she goes back in the court after 6 months, and this judge awards the custody to Anna. Now, Christian had been staying at his aunt's farm in Illinois, and that's what Brando wanted, and that's what everybody wanted. But as far as I'm concerned, that judge is the one that sentenced him by giving him back to that crazy mother. She had him kidnapped later on and what have you. But I lost touch with everybody.
Right. Well, then. Oh, what when you were with Brando, did you ever run into Jack Nicholson?
Oh yeah. He lived. We used the same gate.
Okay.
And Brando would sort of talk to him over the fence, And as a matter of fact, see what happened was how I got brought in was Anna Cashby tried to commit suicide, took an overdose of drugs, whatever. Christian picked up the phone, called the police. The police called Brando. Brando come over to pick him up. And so we went into Judge Eddie Brandt's court that night, and we got temporary custody. Now, when I got over to Tiger Tail with Brando, well, Anna had already, I mean, that's where she lived then. Anna had already left with the boy. And everybody used to hide out at the Bel Air Sands, and that's where she was. So we went up there to get him, and you know, she's trying to scratch me and knee me and everything else. And, you know, I'm not going to hit her. I'm just trying to keep her in play, you know. But she come at me with teeth and fingernails, and she was crazy. And so anyway, the L.A. Times that morning had a huge front page of Anna going to jail in her nightgown. And at the gate, that same gate now where Jack Nicholson goes in, was all the paparazzi, all the reporters. They were all there, and I'm going, I don't know that I'm ready for prime time because I'm just a kid. But I got to get a handle on this because we have 4.5 acres, and we had no alarms, no cameras, no nothing. So I just walked down there with a shotgun. And I walked down there with a shotgun. I said, you know, you guys really got me nervous. It seems to be the event of the year. I mean, I'm afraid somebody's liable to climb over the fence, and I'm going to have to blow their brains out. I really don't want to do that. So, I mean, I put on an act. I was acting myself like I was crazy. But they said, holy God, this guy, you couldn't do this today, Ed. Believe me. I mean, they'd throw me in jail. But I started to walk away, and reporters always got to ask one more question. And he says, who are you? And I turn around, and I says, me? I said, I tell you what, you can call me Shotgun. And I froze them there. They never come over the fence.
What about when Roman Polanski was over at Nicholson's house and he got charged with raping that young girl? Did you have any knowledge about that?
Yeah, that was after my time. That was after my time up there. And I mean, Brando was still there, but I never got involved in that.
No, what about
that's one thing I never got involved in for some reason.
What about the Beatles? What did you have to do with the Beatles?
Well, I saved their career. And the way that happened was it was back in the 60s. And incidentally, the 60s was the golden age of the Hollywood PI. I mean, I love the Philip Marlowe, the Noor, and I got to meet those guys because I was a kid, and I got to meet those Raymond Chandler guys, but the 60s was the golden age. And anyway, the Beatles had just done Hollywood Bowl, been on the Ed Sullivan Show, and they were staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And there was Brian Epstein had a gay lover that kind of worked in the group, and he fired him, he got rid of him. But this guy knew the movement of the Beatles, and he also knew that Brian always carried money and drugs for the kids in his briefcase, because if anybody got caught with the drugs, it wanted to be him and not the kids. So this guy breaks into a bungalow where they were staying in, and so then he's got like $25,000 cash in there, which in today's money is like $250,000. And so he spends that money. And then he sends through a intermediary. He says, "I want another $25,000, and I'll return the briefcase to you intact." And there was some controversial contracts in there too that could have done him some harm. And he said, "And I'll return with everything in it except the money, of course." So we had to go through intermarriages. We had to. We had to put ads in the paper. We had to meet with people and stuff like that. Finally, this guy felt comfortable enough. And look, I'm a kid now. I'm the same age as the Beatles are, you know. And I'm thinking, but I'm thinking I'm bulletproof. I'm thinking I'm smarter than anybody else, I guess. And so I was to meet them at the entrance to LAX. I had two Beverly Hills cops hiding in the bushes. And this clown pulls up in a cab, which I followed him before I knew what he drove. But he's in the back seat of the cab, and so I'm supposed to hand him this bag of money, and he's supposed to hand me the briefcase. Well, I reached in and grabbed him, and I pulled him out of the cab,